Good morning, children. Today we are going to learn a new poem. The poem's name is Photograph. It is written by the British author Shirley Towson. The poem tries to convey with the reader a very important message, that is, art is permanent and life is impermanent. Life is always, we have to take it as transient. It doesn't have any eternity. But art is something different. Whether it is poem or a painting, whatever it is. And nature is also will remain unchanged. The only thing that goes on changing is our life. So life is transient. That is the message the poem wants to convey with its readers. Now let us go and learn the poem. First we can learn a little bit about the author. A Photograph is written by Shirley Towson. She was an English poet born in 1924 in Henley-on-Thames in England. She had a huge passion to write poems. That passion she got from her father. And this poem, A Photograph, is mainly about her mother. Her mother was Marjorie Brown. Now let us move on to the poem. A Photograph, written by Shirley Towson. Let me read the poem for you first. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. All three stood still to smile through their hair. At the angle with the camera, a sweet face, my mother's. That was before I was born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. Come to the second stanza. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she would say. And look how they dressed us for the beach. The sea holiday was her past. Mine is her laugher. Both arrive with the labored ease of loss. Come to the last stanza. Now, she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. And of this circumstance, there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Now let us analyze this poem. The cardboard shows me how it was. Cardboard here simply means an old photograph. Look at this picture. An old photograph. This is here called as cardboard. Poet's mother and her two cousins, they were on a paddling tour to a beach. How it was when the two girl cousins went paddling. Paddling means an outing, especially at seaside or riverside. When you walk along the sands or water, it is called paddling. I will show you one small video of paddling. Look at this playful children, they are paddling in the seashore. That is paddling. So they went for an outing, a sea outing, and they were paddling in the seashore, each one holding one of my mother's hands. The poet's mother's cousins, they were younger than the poet's mother. So those cousins hold the poet's mother's hands. And she, the big girl, poet's mother was the big girl, some 12 years or so. She was then only 12 years. All three stood still to smile through their hair. Why it is smile through their hair? Because of the wind that made the hair fall over their face. And they laughed through the hair. All the three laughed through their hair at the angle with the camera. So their angle took that snapshot. When their angle told them to smile, they did it through the fall down hairs on their face. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born. So here the poet remembers her mother's face in the photograph. It was a sweet face, and it was so before the poet was born. So this snapshot was taken when the poet's mother was only 12 years old. Then her face was so sweet. Look at the next line. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. This couplet, these two lines of the poem, conveys the central idea, the central message, that is, art is permanent and life is impermanent. Life is transient, and art, whether it is poem or nature, that will remain forever. Look at the and the sea, which appears to have changed less, no change even after many years. The sea remains like us earlier, without many changes. And that washed their terribly here means extremely transient feet. Transient means remaining only for a short period. Impermanent, that is transient, short-lived. So the sea, the permanent object of sea, that washing the terribly transient feet of the three children standing there. Now come to the next stanza. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. Then after 20-30 years, poet's mother used to laugh at that snapshot, because see Betty and Dolly, they are her cousins. They stood on either side of the poet's mother. Look at them, she would say, and look how they dressed us for the beach. When she looked at the way they dressed for the beach holiday, now it created a laughter in the poet's mind, in the poet's mother's mind, whenever she got a chance to look at that picture, she used to laugh at it, especially the way the children dressed for the sea holiday. It was a very funny, very memorable moment for her mother. She used to laugh with the photograph. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter. Both rive with the labored ease of loss. The poet here says that she says about two past experiences. The first experience was the sea holiday. The sea holiday was the poet's mother's past, and for the poet, her mother's laughter, both had gone, both had lost with the poet. So she says, both arrive with the labored ease of loss. Both had lost from the poet the two past experiences. The first past experience was her mother's sea holiday, and for the poet, it was her mother's laughter. Both rive with the labored ease of loss. Rive with means that disappointed her, that disappointed her, or that dried memories in her mind. With the labored ease of loss, labored and ease, a contrasting statements. So we can say that oxymoron is the poetic device used there, like when we use bitter and sweet. It's an example of oxymoron. Here loss is one side labored and the other side it is ease. Loss is loss, and she had to face it at any cost. The two losses for her mother, her sea holiday, and for the poet, the laughter of her mother, both had gone. That is what the poet tries to convey here. Now come to the next stanza, last stanza. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. So that was the reason she said in the previous stanza that both rive with the labored ease of loss. She died as many years as that girl lived. So how many years that little girl lived? That much of years before she had died. And of this circumstance, there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. So in this circumstance, the poet went through a state of sadness, a state of pain. In this circumstance, there is nothing to say at all. This sadness and this grief made her keep silent. For a long time, she had been bearing that pain, that sadness, the loss of her mother in her heart. So there is nothing to say at all. That's why she says, its silence silences. So the poet went through a long period of pain and sadness that made her silent. She always kept silent, and that silence makes an environment of silence there, an environment of an ambience of silence there. That is what the poet tells us. Its silence silences. What makes the poet silent? Because of the long memories of her mother. She had lost her mother, and that made her painful and sorrowful. And that made her silent. That silence creates an ambience of silence again there. That is what the poet says. So here we can say that personification is used. Personification. Because silence can't silence anything. So a human quality is given there. Let us check other. The cardboard can't show anything. So here also personification is used. When human quality is attributed to inanimate things, we call it personification. Let us check other poetic devices. Still to smile, stood still smile. It is an example of alliteration. So alliteration means the repetition of consonant sound. Look at the consonant sound used here. Stood, still, and smile. That is alliteration. More alliteration you can find from the same poem. Then we have already discussed the labored ease, that is oxymoron. And look at this. Terribly transient feet. Terribly transient feet. Here the poetic device of transferred epithet. Transferred epithet is used. Transferred epithet means an adjective is used to describe another adjective, but it really meant for another noun. So here, terribly transient feet. What is terribly transient here is not the feet, but the human life. Children, this is a very simple poem, but very interesting one. When you get the ability to read between lines, when you have the ability to find the hidden meanings in a poem, then only you can develop the aesthetic sense in you. So poems like this definitely will help you to develop your aesthetic sense of enjoying literature. Try to read it again, and if you can't understand, refer other books and watch the video once again. Goodbye.